When Billy Graham was asked by a press reporter, "I've heard many preachers better than you, Mr. Graham. Why has God chosen you to be the evangelist to the world?" With his shy, retiring smile, Dr. Graham said, "When I get to heaven, that is going to be my first question." When I get to heaven, that is going to be my first question. Who would have ever thought an ordinary man like that, when he was a younger man preaching, Tory Johnson, one of the founders of Youth for Christ, tells the story that he'd been invited to speak at a high school and he couldn't go, so he called Billy Graham and said, "Will you go for me?" And Billy said, "Okay." So he phoned the school and said, "I can't come, but I'm sending a young evangelist by the name of Billy Graham." They said, "We don't know who he is. We don't want him. If you're not coming, we're going to cancel." And Tory Johnson said, "Please have him. You will not regret it." They said, "No, we don't know him." Tory said, "Have him." So they had him. And Billy came back and Tory called him and said, "How did it go?" He said, "Not very well, Tory. But one person did respond to the gospel message I gave." Said, "Did you write down his name so you can pray for him?" He said, "Yes." He said, "What's his name?" His name was Warren Wiersbe. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? An ordinary person who was not known goes and preaches as a replacement, and the hosts are not too delighted about having him. And one man by the name of Warren Wiersbe gives his life to the Lord, who later on became the pastor at Moody Church and one of the great expositors in recent memory. Don't underestimate what God can do through you. The last chapter is not written yet. Nehemiah was simply and plainly a civil engineer. That's who he was. But think of where God positioned him. Here he is in an enemy's palace, but he has the most sacred trust of all of them. He would taste the food before the king would eat it. That's the kind of integrity Nehemiah had. That's the kind of trust Nehemiah had. He earned the right of respect. And so the king, when he spoke to him, knew when he asked him a question, he would get a true and an honest answer. There arose a person to help build that wall. You are an individual. That comes from the Latin, which means you are indivisible. You cannot be broken up or fragmented or reconstituted. You are an individual of unique capacity. God can use you, maybe with a statement, maybe with a word, maybe with a gift, and only heaven will reveal ultimately how God has used some of the unsung heroes of our time because they were totally submitted to him.